Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today, Deadmau5, stuff I used to do. So, time to talk about this guy again. I don't think he needs any introduction at this point, like, seriously. As I'm sure many of you are well aware, I have reviewed this guy's entire studio album discography. I also reviewed the guy's recent 2016 album, or W Drive 2016 album. Some people were assholes about that. I reviewed that one on the day it came out, I think. I've wondered on and off whether or not that was the brightest of ideas, though I figured since A, I'd set aside time during work to listen to it 3 times, somehow, and B, I think Joel's music tends to be fairly simplistic and not the kind of thing I have to think about a lot. And, while my opinions on that album haven't changed that much since I reviewed it, it's grown on me a little bit. Like, I think I will have to finally admit that 3-Pound Chicken Wing is, in fact, better than Superliminal, for instance. One thing that kind of confused me, though, about the reaction to that review is that a lot of people got mad at me for acting like I was an insider on Joel's music. I am really not sure what gave people that impression. I could have sworn I explained there I didn't consider myself to be an insider. I guess since I didn't say that outright, maybe people assumed I was claiming to be, but whatever. I mean, I did follow the guy on SoundCloud in between album title goes here and While One Is Less Than Two. Heard a fairly substantial share of unreleased demos, but, like, I've never seen his live streams. I don't follow the guy's unreleased material anymore, as it occasionally ends up spoiling my opinions on the main albums, and I personally prefer digesting music in album form, so no. I'm not an insider on Deadmau5. But that's actually kind of why I was excited to hear this compilation here, Stuff I Used to Do. There were 2 tracks on here that I already recognized and had heard previously. One was Support, which was on Get Scraped, and quite frankly was not one of the standouts. And the other was the alternate demo version of Creep, which obviously eventually got tweaked and released on While One Is Less Than Two. To be honest, I still prefer the final album version over this more simplistic demo. I think the final version was more distinctive and interesting. This version, meanwhile, I mean, it's fine. There's some cool sounds in here, like it's either like pizzicato strings or maybe just that exact same piano sample just pitched down. But the one thing that always bugs me about this demo is that it abruptly cuts off at the end. This fact just kind of highlights how this version is unfinished. Meanwhile, on the album, not only did I get to hear the song end, but also hear it flow seamlessly into somewhere up here. We still are talking about a track that made it into my top 5 favorite tracks ever from this guy, so welcome addition regardless. But basically everything else on this compilation was a complete mystery to me. I mean, I know there were some that came out of compilations that I'd never bothered to listen to, like A Little Oblique or the Halcyon 441 thing, but I hadn't actually heard the majority of these. So now the question is, how does this compilation fare as a whole? It's alright. Like, I really liked it at first, but it kinda wore out with 3 listens. Insert booing here. It did get me thinking, though, about how this particular release is a compilation and how Deadmau5 differentiates between these and his regular albums. You'd think that the albums are the ones that you can enjoy as full experiences and the compilations you judge on a track-by-track basis. I think that might be true in some areas, but, like, you have stuff like his most recent album, which was basically an album in name only, and was really only just a glorified compilation that wasn't meant to be digested as a holistic experience. But what's weird is that I think this compilation here, Stuff I Used to Do, might work better as an album than a compilation. It actually kind of has its own sound that it kind of keeps up more or less the whole time. Everything's pretty up-tempo aside from a handful of moments, and it surprisingly maintains a fairly consistent vibe. But that being said, when I went down a more track-by-track level, to be honest, I'm not really convinced any of these are particularly huge favorites of mine. The best track on here by far, though, is HaxPigMeow, which as it turns out is a demo/alternate version of Infraturbo Pig Kart Racer that, unlike Creep, I enjoy more than the final album version. Not only more interesting, but also felt like it had more grit and substance. The rest, though, like, there's nothing outright terrible or anything, but For the most part, my opinion varies from, yeah, this one's alright, to, yeah, this one's okay. Messages from Nowhere is pretty cool. It's got a dark and brooding and experimental atmosphere to it, kind of like Take Care of the Proper Paperwork and Deus Ex Machina. That one's a grower. You got tracks like My Opinion, which has kind of got a Daft Punk-ish feel to it. All this weird vocoder filtering on it. You got Squid, which is this short and super intense drum and bass IDM experiment, not unlike some of the ones you'd find on Project 56. You got Obsidian, which is another darker sort of track that has all these neat little flute loops. And then there's the kind of hip-hop-esque and pretty catchy Long Walk Off a Short Pier. That was a pretty fun one too, though the main synth tone uses in the melody here, as well as the occasional rock the beat sample. It gets a bit grating after a while, but those tracks are all good. But then you also get something like Screen Door, which I really wanted to like more than I did, because like it has all these cool string sounds and fake orchestral tones, kind of like stuff you would find on the Richard D. James album. But the voice that talks about being blinded by eclipses and boxes with a pinhole in it, that voice kinda ruined it for me. Like, it was clearly meant to be there as a joke. The track would have been fine if he just played that sample once, but repeating it makes it less funny. Stuff like this, songs that have potential but have some like little elements that bug me, is unfortunately kind of a running theme on this album. The melody on 50-something Cats was really good, but the cat sounds or maybe cat imitations kinda weren't that... didn't like those. And of course there's Charlie Can't Dance, which is basically just Long Walk Off a Short Pier without any of the parts that made it good. Oh, and I almost forgot Super Lover, which is another more intense song, kind of like the Oshawa Connection from Get Scraped, but its placement near the end kind of has the same effect as all those other songs near the end of Get Scraped that I kind of found to be unmemorable. Oh right, and Digital. That one's got a somewhat grating main synth line, but the speak and spellish computer voice hook makes this one stand out a little more, so I'll give this one a pass. Yeah, that one's good. But I think that's just kind of how I feel about this compilation as a whole. I'll give it a pass. It's fine, but nothing outstanding, personally. I'm sure a lot of other people like this one more than I did. Maybe because I personally prefer a little more down-tempo in the mix every now and then. I didn't vibe with it as much. I don't know, it works a lot better when I just have it on in the background, and all the tracks just weirdly seem to blend together. And it's fun then, but listening to it in depth was kind of a chore and only took away from my enjoyment. There is a good handful of good tracks on here that I can see myself returning to occasionally, but if I had to judge the whole thing as one package, it's just kind of average. Good as background music, but kind of a letdown. I almost kind of wish I had reviewed this one right after it came out too, because I liked it more then. But I'm sure angry Deadmau5 fans are going to be calling for my beheading now, so how about I swerve this video in a completely different direction by also reviewing a different older Deadmau5 compilation that I actually really like. Project 56. I skipped doing a full video on this one, and to be honest, I can't remember why exactly. I guess it's because it's a compilation or something. Or maybe because the idea of covering it seemed intimidating, as there are 57 tracks on here, about half of which aren't even a minute long, and none of which are longer than 3 minutes, except Antiquism, but that one doesn't even count because it's separated into 2 different tracks that only total a little over 3 minutes if you add them together, hence the title Project 56, even though there's 57 tracks, but I digress. That's actually kind of the cool thing about Project 56. The collection of, like, a crap ton of tiny little tracks idea isn't something I've really seen before. Or at the very least, not done this well. I suppose the fact that I enjoyed as much as I do is just a fluke or something. But the thing is, I can listen to this compilation and all of these songs just kinda blurred together, mainly because a lot of them kinda end abruptly, and they feel like 57 parts of one giant whole. But I can also sit up and listen and notice when a song happens and think, oh, that trick's pretty cool, I never noticed that one before. Normally I jack points for having so many songs that aren't memorable enough to notice, but in this particular case, because of the unique presentation, I think it works to the compilation's benefit. When I sit up and listen, Project 56 is just as all over the place and disjointed as the layout would have you believe. But it strikes this this perfect balance between variety and being samey so that Project 56 actually feels like one big whole. That's not to say I don't have my problems with it, and I kinda do. For instance, the reuse of tracks from Get Scraped. I mean, Get Scraped came out after this, but whatever. Like, I Forget is here, Board of Canada is here, Try Again is here, although just renamed to Nice Try Kiddo, and even 8-Bit is here, although cheaply only the first minute of it, in the form of just before 8-Bit. Yeah, that's kinda cheap. All these songs are better in the context of Get Scraped, but they work here, I guess. By the way, I forgot to mention my Get Scraped review because I didn't notice yet at the time, but someone pointed out to me that the melody of I Forget became the chord progression on I Remember. And once I picked up on that, I thought that's actually pretty awesome. But I digress. Oh yeah, and Monday from While One Is Less Than Two is on here as well, but this version has, like, actual vocals from Steve Duda, I believe, instead of the vocoders on the album version, which I think at this point I like a little more, but whatever, it's cool. Also notable is the presence of a couple of joke songs, like a song about squirrels. This one is not that funny. I don't need to hear about fucking squirrels in the ass, thank you very much. But unlike Screen Door, it lasts a short enough time so it's like just a quick little weird moment. There's also Bored, where Joel talks about getting a drink through a vocoder over some actual pretty cool melodies. And My Fucking Adventure, which is like this cheesy 8-bit video game theme song or something. But the vast majority of these tracks are like IDM drum and bass stuff with some occasional cool melodic atmospheric stuff. Occasionally you have some songs like Orange File and Uvivial, which have more orchestral sounds, or stuff like Buttercup, which is really harsh and hard-hitting, or piano tracks like American Slushie, which is probably my personal favorite in the whole collection. And it all just kind of strangely builds up to that cool IDM-ish atmosphere, and it just kind of works. Even as one giant whole, it's the kind of thing that surprisingly really benefits from repeat listens. So in that regard, it's basically the exact opposite of stuff I used to do, which has not benefited from repeat listens. Though, both are surprisingly good background music, and both are compilations that feel more cohesive than one would initially think. So I will give both of them credit for that. I think both are worth checking out. Always game for a little more Deadmau5 in this world, but I personally don't see myself coming back to stuff I used to do all that much. For that one, I'm feeling a 6.5 out of 10, but for Project 56, it's a 7.7. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.